When we think of glorious empires, we usually picture the clash of swords echoing across the battlefield, the thunder of galloping horses or rousing speeches that silence tens of thousands. But there's another side, quieter, subtler, that slipped silently through the cobbled streets and hidden corners of ancient Rome. It didn't shimmer like gold or shine like military triumphs, but it was essential. That was urine. Sounds strange, maybe, but don't wrinkle your nose or click away just yet. Let your mind settle for a moment, because that pale yellow liquid was once a vital part of one of history's most magnificent civilizations. So much so, it was considered a national resource. Today there will be no tales of Caesar's conquests, no Punic wars, no shady Senate assassinations. This is a different kind of story, quieter, but just as fascinating a journey through fish-scented markets, bustling public baths, and the constant gurgle of water running beneath Rome's stone roads. This is the Rome you rarely see, a Rome with smells, textures, and very human quirks. So if you're lying down, pull your blanket up a bit. If you're sitting, pour yourself a warm cup of tea. Because in the next few minutes, you'll hear a story that's odd, unique, and unexpectedly real, a tale of pee toilets and daily Roman life. Shall we begin? To modern folks, urine is something no one wants to dwell on. It's embarrassing, and, let's face it, it smells. We flush it away instantly, hide it like a shameful bodily secret. But let's rewind back to ancient Rome, where this so-called waste was actually treated as a precious resource. Not because Romans had some weird obsession, but because they had a surprisingly practical, even ahead of their time mindset. What's in urine? Ammonia, a strong alkaline compound, and a natural enemy of grease and grime. In an age without Ariel or Omo, without spring breeze or lavender blossom scents, ammonia was the miracle liquid of laundry. And so Rome launched a city-wide mission to collect urine. On busy streets next to stone pillars or intersections, large ceramic jars called urina receptacula were placed. Passers-by would make a contribution. No shame, no weird looks. It was seen as a public good, like recycling bottles or sorting your trash today. You relieved yourself and helped keep the city clean. A win-win. Once the jars were full, the urine was taken to Phallonica Roman laundries. These weren't humming with machines or filled with the scent of detergent. Instead, there were stone vats, barrels of liquid, and a team of workers stomping tirelessly on piles of cloth soaked in diluted urine. Yes, stomping. Not dancing, but a serious part of the cleaning process, using body weight to push ammonia deep into every fiber, breaking down oils, lifting away sweat grime and the day's dirt. Slow, definitely, but impressively effective. Bare feet pressed down on heavy fabric. The sharp, acrid smell rose from the stone tubs, but no one complained. Everyone understood cleanliness sometimes costs a sacrificed nose. And just like that, something once cast aside became central to the empire's obsession with appearance and order. But that's not the end of the story, because behind the Phallonica walls were very human tales, laundry workers with wrinkled feet, white togas fresh as new after hours of trampling, and the occasional awkward moment like realizing the towel you're using was once soaked in your neighbor's pee. And this is just the beginning. Because behind every drop of urine lies a piece of history, not always fragrant, but always unforgettable. Do you smell that? Don't worry, that's just the scent of ancient Rome. The scent of a civilization that never wasted, even a single drop. If you've ever thought doing laundry was a light, easy job, the Romans would like a word with you. Welcome to the Phallonica, a place where clothes weren't just cleaned by hand, but also by foot with urine. And something even stranger, professional pride. It may sound bizarre, but to the ancient Romans, washing clothes wasn't some trivial task. It was an industry. A Phallonica wasn't just a laundry workshop. It was an essential link in the social and economic chain of urban life. From the crowded streets of Pompeii to the bustling corners of Ostia, you could always find at least one such establishment. No map needed, just follow the sound of relentless stomping mixed with a smell. You'd never mistake for anything else. There, the Fullone's professional launderers worked tirelessly all day, They weren't slaves, but they weren't part of the upper class either. They lived in the middle, skilled enough to be respected, hard-working enough that no one envied them. And don't think washing a toga was simple. That long, pure white ceremonial garment dragging to the floor carried the weight of a family's honor. A single stain could ruin a reputation. The process began with something as unpleasant as it sounds: urine. On street corners across Rome, public jars were placed for people to quite literally make a donation. This liquid rich in ammonia was surprisingly effective at cleaning. It was diluted and poured into stone basins where clothes were soaked, and then came the next step: stomping. The fullones would step into the vats and stomp on the soaked clothes, almost like dancing a strange rhythmic ritual. Some had signature techniques, timing pressure patterns said to be passed down through generations, and they would stomp for hours, barefoot, drenched with the smell clinging to their skin. People used to say clothes might come out clean, but the launderer never smelled fresh again. Once the stomping was done, the clothes were rinsed in clean water, sometimes from a stream, sometimes recycled from other parts of the process. Then they were placed in the sulphurarium, a sealed room where garments were fumigated with sulfur vapors. This helped whiten the fabric, leaving togas as bright as snow. Of course, the trade-off was the eye-stinging stench that came with it. Finally, everything was taken to the rooftops to dry under the sun. Roman roof tiles absorbed the Mediterranean sunlight, drying every fibre, until the clothes were fresh, ready for a new day of politics, a courtroom appearance, or a public ceremony. What do you think? It feels more like a ritual than manual labour. But in truth, that's exactly what it reflects about Roman society, a world where appearance was identity, cleanliness was proof of virtue, and a single stain could cost you respect. Folonike didn't just serve everyday customers. Some major operations had contracts with officials, senators, even noble families. Some workshops employed dozens of people and operated like real businesses, complete with storage areas, processing stations, and client reception rooms. Orders were placed, garments picked up and delivered, almost like an ancient Roman version of modern laundry services. And if you're smiling to yourself, thinking, this sounds like the world's first dry cleaning brand, well, you wouldn't be wrong. In the Roman world, a white garment wasn't just clothing. It was a statement, a status symbol, a source of pride, scrubbed clean by the anonymous feet of hard-working launderers whose footprints quite literally are still imprinted in history. Now imagine yourself in ancient Rome. You've just wrapped up a lavish banquet. Your belly is full, stuffed with rich roasted forest mushrooms, deep red wine poured from an amphora, and fish drenched in garum, that divine fermented sauce the Romans loved so much they used it in nearly everything. And then, a stir. Something moves. You feel it, and suddenly you know it's time to act, immediately. But don't panic. Just a few steps away, you'll find a structure that both amazes and slightly horrifies modern visitors: the latrina publica, ancient Rome's public toilet. But forget about private stalls, locked doors, and air fresheners. No. A Roman latrina was a completely different experience. Open space. No dividers. No privacy. Just a long row of stone seats, evenly carved with round holes, where everyone from Roman citizens to faraway travellers would sit side by side, relax, and strike up a conversation. Yes, in Rome, using the toilet wasn't just a personal necessity, it was a social event. You could catch up on the news, gossip about politics, complain about grape prices, or even negotiate business deals, all while resting your feet on cool stone and gently letting go. A large latrina could serve dozens of people at once, often built with care roofs to shield from sun and rain, finely carved stone walls, and most impressively, a continuous stream of water running beneath the seats to keep things relatively clean. Some even had built-in hand-washing basins, so you could clean up before heading back to your meeting at the forum, assuming you weren't in too much of a hurry. But there's one detail that might make modern folks take a step back: the wiping process. Romans didn't use paper. They used a tussorium, a stick with a sponge attached to the end. After use, you'd rinse it in a nearby channel filled with vinegar water, and then place it back for the next person. A truly shared family tool, in the most literal sense. Creepy, maybe. But to the Romans, this was completely normal. They didn't carry the same sense of shame we do today. The human body, and all its needs, was natural. Sharing a bathroom didn't embarrass them. If anything, it fostered community. Some scholars even describe public toilets as the ancient version of social media places, where information spread quickly and quite vividly. Of course not, everyone embraced this togetherness. Wealthy Romans often had private latrinas in their homes, with personal water lines, flushing systems, and slaves to assist if needed. But for the majority of the population, from merchants to soldiers, public latrinas were everyday spaces not just for relieving oneself, but also for hearing news, whispering schemes, or simply passing time. And if you think it was just a few stone benches and holes, you're underestimating Roman engineering. These latrinas were connected to the Cloaca Maxima, a massive underground sewage system flowing beneath the entire city. Water came from aqueducts stretching across the sky, cleverly distributed to supply households, while also keeping the sewers flowing, making sure everything moved along, even the things you'd rather not think about. In other words, over 2,000 years ago, the Romans had public toilets with running water, a vast drainage system, and communal cleaning tools that passed from hand to hand. Strange as it may sound, one thing is clear: the Romans were ahead of their time. A civilization that blended convenience engineering and openness, quite literally. Smelly, but brilliant. In the previous part, we chuckled, imagining ancient Roman citizens sitting side by side in public toilets, chatting away cheerfully, and sharing a communal sponge stick, as if it were some sacred symbol of civic life. But don't be too quick to assume that after those intimate heart-to-heart moments, everything was simply flushed away like water. No, this was Rome. Even urine wasn't wasted. You heard that right. Urine was an asset, a valuable raw material that could be traded. And once something could be traded naturally, it could also be taxed. We're rewinding the clock to around 70 AD, when Emperor Vespasian, the founder of the Flavian dynasty, had just taken the throne after a chaotic civil war. The imperial treasury was empty, the people were exhausted, and the empire itself was devouring money like a massive machine that needed constant fueling. While many rulers might have thought about raising land taxes or expanding territories to loot more wealth, Vespasian had a different idea, one that was frankly daring: a urine tax. He wasn't a romantic, he was a realist, and when he looked around, he saw one simple truth. Romans urinated daily, regularly, in times of war or peace. So why not turn that seemingly harmless habit into a steady stream of income for the state? And so, Vectigal Urinae, the urine tax, was born. Urine was collected from latrinae, public toilets, and stored in large clay jars placed throughout the city. This pungent liquid was then sold to laundries, tanneries, and dyeing workshops, places where urine was considered nothing less than liquid gold. Why? Because urine rich in ammonia could clean grease, soften animal hides, and even help dye stick evenly to fabrics. Laundry workers used it to soak underwear and clean tablecloths without shame. To them, it was just a tool of the trade. To Vespasian, it was a revenue stream. But not everyone agreed. When his son Prince Titus expressed his disgust and criticized his father for such a stinky tax, Vespasian didn't argue. He simply held up a gold coin, handed it to his son, and asked, "Smell this. Does it stink?" Titus replied, "Number." Vespasian nodded and smiled. "Pecunia non olet. Money doesn't stink." That one line didn't just end the conversation, it became a proverb that has survived more than 2 millennia. How many businessmen, officials, or black market dealers have repeated it whenever someone questioned the origin of their profits? How many people have used that phrase to soothe their conscience or justify a shady deal? The story of the urine tax isn't just a quirky anecdote, it's a vivid example of a kind of practical, cold-blooded and razor-sharp thinking that's almost admirable. It shows that in Vespasian's world, anything could have value, even what others threw away. He didn't try to win hearts. He didn't need to be praised as a king for the people. He just needed the empire to keep running, and he found money in the last place anyone expected: the bottom of a urine jar. And strangely enough, it worked. The urine tax endured. The treasury recovered. And his legacy, though, forever tied to a foul smell, held strong for centuries. Today, if you visit certain public toilets in Italy, you might find them labelled Vespasiani, a name honouring the emperor who once had the vision to tax pee. A reminder that sometimes value isn't in the material itself, but in the eyes that see opportunity where others don't. After hearing about the urine tax, you might think the Romans were systematically dirty, but in reality, it was quite the opposite. They were obsessed with cleanliness in a way that was passionate, meticulous, and astonishingly organized. Romans could tolerate all sorts of vices, betrayal, theft, even political murder, but one thing they couldn't stand was stink. To them, being dirty wasn't just unpleasant, it was a sign of low character. That smell wasn't just body odor, it was the stench of carelessness, inferiority, and even savagery. Whether you were a slave or a noble, you were judged by how you smelled. And in a time without artificial perfumes, staying clean and fragrant wasn't just a choice, it was a standard of living. Surprisingly, even without industrial soap, the Romans invented an entire arsenal of hygiene tools that would put a modern-day spa to shame. They mixed wood ash with water to create lye, a simple but powerful cleaner that cut through grease. They used white clay to absorb oil and dirt. And they added herbs like lavender, rosemary, and thyme, which not only disinfected and deodorized, but also left a gentle scent behind. The wealthy took things even further. They developed skincare blends that cleansed and nourished olive oil, red wine honey, and even pine resin. This mix didn't just clean the skin, it softened, it gave it a glow, and left it sticky enough to show you were truly committed to the ritual. It's worth noting that the Romans had no concept of foaming soap. They didn't scrub with suds, they oiled, then scraped. First, they'd slather olive oil all over their bodies to attract sweat dirt and dead skin, then scrape it all off with a curved bronze tool called a strigil. The sensation may have been a little rough, but the result, skin that was polished smooth, and a scraping cloth soaked in unforgettable human essence. This technique, now making a comeback under the name dry scraping, is being praised by modern spas as a trendy therapy. But if the Romans could see it, they'd probably just shrug. We were doing that 2,000 years ago. Cleanliness for the Romans wasn't just a private habit, it became a full-scale social event. They built massive public bath complexes called thermi-palatial bathhouses, where cleanliness and community came together. A typical visit followed a set routine: sweat it out in the hot room, caldarium, relax in the warm room, tepidarium, then cool off with a shock in the cold room, frigidarium. But bathing was only part of the experience. You could chat, debate, philosophy, read, exercise, have a snack, get a massage, and catch up on the latest political gossip. Think of it as ancient Facebook, but wetter and with more olive oil. And don't think it was just once a day. Some Romans bathed 2 or 3 times daily. The philosopher Seneca even complained he couldn't concentrate on writing because of the constant noise from the thermi, scraping sounds, yelling, splashing, echoing from morning till night. So why the obsession with being clean? Partly because of the Mediterranean heat, which made body odor more common, but mostly because Roman society was scent-based. You could be poor, but if you were clean and smelled good, you could still walk into a crowd with dignity. On the other hand, if you reeked, even dressed in a silk toga, people saw you as an uncivilized brute. Ironically, though, while Romans were meticulous about personal hygiene, they were pretty negligent when it came to public sanitation. The sewers were full of bacteria. Public toilets were social hubs, but rarely cleaned. The thermi were luxurious, yet you might still have a nasal accident if you sat too close to someone who hadn't washed thoroughly. Still, Roman ideas about hygiene were far ahead of their time. While medieval Europe avoided bathing out of fear of disease, the Romans saw it as a duty not just to cleanse the body, but to renew the spirit. To them, hot water wasn't just for washing, it was a form of rebirth, a way to shed the noise and grime of the world and return to a pure state of being. As one Roman philosopher wrote, "The Romans do not merely bathe, they are reborn in every drop of hot water." And perhaps that's why, whether it was with ashes, clay, or olive oil, for the Romans, clean wasn't just a condition. It was a way of life. We've just spent 10 minutes praising the Romans as masters of cleanliness, marveling at their grand public baths, their love for hygiene and body care. But maybe it's time to pull back the curtain and admit something. Yes, they were clean, but also very dirty. Roman cleanliness was like a beautifully plated dish, made with an unwashed spoon. They loved the idea of being clean, but often only cleaned part of the picture. Call it partial clean syndrome. When you brush your teeth, but use fermented urine. When you do skincare, but what you're smearing on your face is a mix of fish guts and tree resin. Yes, you heard that right. Roman hygiene is equal parts impressive and disturbing. Picture a relaxing day at the Thermae, the massive Roman public baths. You soak in warm water sweated out in the steam room, get massaged with fragrant oils. But then you realize the towels are shared, passed from one person to the next like a beloved family heirloom of bacteria. The exfoliating oil scraped off your body flows into a channel and might get reused later. No joke. And the strigil, the curved metal scraper, was a shared item too, kind of like the entire neighborhood using one communal toothbrush. You came to get clean but left with a collection of microbes from dozens of strangers. Maybe you felt cleaner, but safer. That's debatable, and we're just getting started. One of the strangest and absolutely real Roman habits, brushing their teeth with urine. They believed fermented urine contained ammonia, a substance that could whiten teeth. So they'd mix it with crushed seashell powder, swish it around in their mouths and spit it out or not. We're not sure. The poet Catullus once mocked a man with suspiciously white teeth, implying, "I'm not jealous, because I know what you're using." Welcome to the world before minty toothpaste. And beauty. Oh, it was an art form, and not for the faint of heart. A popular Roman moisturizer recipe featured salted fish guts, olive oil, pine resin, and fire ash, resulting in a thick paste that smelled like a hot day at the fish market. They believed it whitened skin, softened calluses, and slowed aging. Some ancient medical texts even recommended using animal excretions as hair treatment. You have to admire the creativity and the bravery. Now about toilets. No toilet paper. Instead, they used a sponge attached to a stick, called a spongia, soaked in vinegar or salt water. After each session, it was rinsed off and placed back for the next user. Sitting next to a stranger while doing your business is awkward enough, but sharing the sponge, that's a whole new level of bold. After learning this, maybe we should silently thank our toilet paper every morning. And that's what makes history so fascinating, funny, and sometimes a bit nauseating. The Romans, who gave us gladiator arenas, legal systems, and monumental architecture, were also the same people who smeared fish on their faces and gargled with pee. A civilization both ahead of its time and deeply devoted to habits that today make us want to wash our hands immediately. But perhaps the most wonderful part of all this is, even without tools, without knowledge of microbiology, and without antibacterial soap, the Romans still tried to be cleaner, more beautiful, more civilized. That effort, strange or crude as it was, still stands as powerful proof of one deeper truth. Sometimes the dirty parts of history are the most beautiful portraits of what it means to be human. The Romans didn't just love cleanliness, they pursued it with the passion of someone crafting a way of life, almost like an art form. It wasn't the simple kind of clean, like wash your hands before dinner, but a cleanliness that reached into every pore, every fold of fabric, every trace of fragrance trailing behind one's footsteps. A stylish Roman didn't just go for a bath, they entered the baths as if stepping onto a stage where each motion of washing, oiling and perfuming followed a set choreography, a social code of elegance, scent and status. In that world, body odor wasn't a biological issue, it was a political one. A properly chosen fragrance could get you a seat at a senator's banquet, while a faint whiff of staleness might earn you looks as if you were some barbarian who had wandered in from the frontier. Perfume wasn't just scented water, it was a marker of class, a declaration of dignity. The Romans were fragrant to a degree that might seem almost bizarre today. They dabbed oils on their hair wrists, collars, the hems of their togas, and even on their sandals. A true Roman gentleman could stride confidently through the Forum Romanum simply because his heels smelled like jasmine. And of course, to smell divine, you needed help. The wealthy elite of Rome never laid a finger on their own oils or towels. They had an entire squad of attendants, oil appliers, strigil scrapers, lotion spreaders, powder puffers, ear cleaners, and let's not forget dedicated back scratchers. And not just any scratching would do. It had to be in the right spot, at the right rhythm, by the right person. There's even a record of a senator storming out of a meeting because his usual back scratcher had been replaced without notice. That's how deep it went. Cleanliness to the Romans wasn't just a habit, it was a form of power. But beneath all that sophisticated scent lay a much starker reality. Under their perfumed footsteps stretched a vast network of sewers that even the Romans themselves regarded with awe and fear. Considered a marvel of ancient engineering, the Cloaca Maxima channeled waste from bathhouses, public toilets, and markets under the city. It was magnificent and utterly foul. Trash, rotting food, animal corpses, and tons of human waste all merged into what the locals jokingly called the Black River. During the rainy season, that river didn't stay put. It surged up, spilling into the stone-paved streets where thin-soled sandals offered little protection from what might be called Rome's holy water. And from those murky underground currents, a darker legacy emerged. Amid the golden glow of imperial power, Rome quietly became a cradle of disease. Damp conditions, rotting organic matter, and an explosion in the rat population. And rats never travel alone. They bring plagues, malaria, typhoid, and sometimes illnesses with no names. You might step into a therme for relaxation, but there was no guarantee you wouldn't walk out with something festering inside you. The historian Galen wrote of a chilling scene. A man soaking in the hot bath suddenly coughed up blood and collapsed. A death as gentle as a spa day, but with a cause far less comforting. So in their pursuit of absolute cleanliness, the Romans may have trapped themselves in a grand paradox. The more civilized they became, the more systems they had to build to deal with filth. Yet those very systems, the baths, the latrines, the underground sewers, became perfect breeding grounds for bacteria. Cleanliness ceased to be a pure ideal and became a gilded trap, one that could turn on anyone who chased it too far. That was the quiet tragedy of an overly advanced society. People lived in meticulously curated hygiene, only to die from the microbes that very hygiene nurtured. Rome smelled like heaven above, but rotted from beneath. And when you douse decay in perfume to mask the scent of a city slowly falling apart, it's no longer about being clean. It's about putting on a performance. After nearly an hour, we've seen the Romans use urine for just about everything: brushing their teeth, washing clothes, making cosmetics, even taxing it. Sounds like a joke, but it's true. So what about us, the people of the 21st century? The age of satellites orbiting Earth, AI chatting in place of humans, blockchain fighting fraud, and bubble tea on every street corner. Do you think we're more civilized? Maybe. But civilization doesn't always mean leaving the past behind. Sometimes it means going back just in a new way. Let me tell you a few stories. Today, amid climate summits and environmental crises, a quiet movement is spreading across Europe, reusing urine as fertilizer. Not because people are out of options, but because urine is too full of nutrients to waste. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. The exact nutrients plants need are naturally found in the stuff we flush away every day. So why let it flow into the sewer, then spend millions treating wastewater when we could collect it at the source? That's what some companies are doing. With filtering systems, disinfecting concentration tech, and voila, you get a clean green liquid for watering crops, even one that can be bottled and sold. In Sweden, a startup is designing toilets that separate urine not out of some quirky idea, but because of a bigger vision, a closed-loop agriculture system where every drop of liquid gold has value. The Romans collected urine in ceramic jars placed on street corners. We use smart sensors, pH monitoring apps, and real-time dashboard displays. The tech has changed, but the core idea hasn't turning what was once considered filthy into something that sustains life. You think that's just happening down on Earth? Look up at the International Space Station orbiting over 250 miles above us. Up there, every drop of water is as precious as liquid diamonds. Urine isn't dumped, it's filtered, recycled, and turned into drinking water. Astronauts drink their own recycled urine, not because they enjoy it, but because they understand survival depends on how well we can reuse what we have. NASA even has a famous saying, "Today's urine is tomorrow's coffee." Can you imagine a future human base on Mars might begin with a urine filtration plant? Not as flashy as sci-fi movies, but real, sustainable, and deeply human. The Romans used to say Pecunia, non-Olet money, doesn't stink. Maybe today we should say, if water runs out, urine might be the beginning. Because as you can see, progress isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it loops curves and takes us back. We're researching dry separation toilets to ease the load on wastewater systems, something ancient people unknowingly practiced with outdoor latrines. We're making eco-soap from used cooking oil, just like people once used fireplace ash to wash their hands. They didn't have patents, but they had survival instincts. We have technology, but sometimes our technology is trying to imitate those instincts. History in the end goes full circle. What was once looked down upon becomes the clean tech of today. What was once seen as dirty may now be the key to our future. And isn't it fascinating that to go forward we sometimes have to step back? Not to return to the past, but to learn its deepest lesson. Nothing is ever truly useless if you look at it the right way. Even urine, or a forgotten idea. We've just travelled through over 2,000 years of history, not on horseback, not by train, and definitely not in a spaceship, but through sewers. It's not the most glamorous journey, but it reveals some of the most fascinating and honest corners of human civilization. From the gentle trickle of ancient Roman aqueducts, to the flush of a modern toilet, from public latrines of the past, to the urine recycling systems on space stations, one thing becomes crystal clear. What we usually try to avoid may actually be the hidden current that sustains society itself. The Romans are often remembered for the Colosseum, or for laying the legal foundations of the Western world. But they left behind another legacy, a quieter one, the courage to confront the dirty side of life. Not just to endure it, but to make use of it. Emperor Vespasian, who literally taxed urine, might have been thousands of years ahead of his time. His famous saying, "Pecunia, non-Olet money doesn't stink," wasn't just political savvy. It was a philosophy if you look past the surface, no matter how unpleasant you might find value in what others throw away. History, as it turns out, is far from clean, but it's incredibly honest. What's buried deepest often reveals the most about who we are, our needs, our fears, our creativity, and even our hope. After this, you might never look at a toilet the same way again. Who knows? Maybe it's the silent symbol of an entire revolution, from wilderness to civilization, from instinct to infrastructure, from shame to pride. And if after this video you feel a strange sense of calm stepping into a public restroom, or find yourself oddly curious about the future of waste treatment, don't be surprised. History has a way of sneaking into our minds through the most unexpected pipes. Thanks for joining me on this journey, a little absurd, a little stinky, but deeply human and weirdly touching. If you found this video worth watching, leave a little sign like, if you agree that even stinky emperors deserve some respect. Subscribe, so you don't miss more strange and sometimes kind of gross stories from history. Comment, and let me know which moment made you laugh or think the most, because history isn't just about the glory at the top. It's also what we hide beneath the toilet lid, where true civilization begins.